This is a weird movie. It's slow and often brutal. I suppose the obvious comparison is with a Terrence Malik movie, and I'd agree, though I actually would also compare it to No Country for Old Men. But before I explain myself, let's talk about the 3D. Something seemed off from the get go, but I could not immediately put my finger on it. The first 30 minutes or so of this has a stark white background, and the foreground is very dark. It seemed the 3D always wanted to invert. Now, I know we have a natural tendency to interpret light as closer and dark as far. It's how various 3D bump map illusions work. So while thought that is what I was seeing. But I also noticed other things. I noticed the eyes seem to have this hollow quality to them, as if the bodies were empty and lacked substance. The effect worked very well in the context of the mood and spiritual themes of this movie. However, eventually I realized that wasn't intentional. The so called 3D here is, in fact, a cheap auto conversion, no different than the 2D to 3D conversion built into a lot of 3D TVs. The sad thing is that it often worked, but needed some touch ups. Most shots contained several depth errors. In fact, I think almost every shot did. The effect left an uneasy feeling in the brain that things weren't quite right, even if you couldn't quite tell always where it was happening. Now, curiously, this actually is consistent with the mood of the movie. Its world, characters, and the journey they take us on also have an uneasy and never quite right feel to it. So this cheapo, error-prone scene warping 3D effect actually often feels at home. In fact, if I were directing a conversion crew to fix this up, I might instruct them to leave the hollowness in the eyes, as it does give a striking dead man walking quality. But to be clear, I do consider this a carnival rip-off bait and switch to label this a 3D movie. I looked up information about this movie, and no article or promo material I could find ever mentioned the existence of a 3D version, so there's no reason to believe this is anything other than a cash grab distortion of the movie. However, like watching Wizard of Oz while listening to Pink Floyd, it does work in an accidental kind of way. Now, getting back to about the movie itself, I suppose most people would hate it. In fact, I found myself going through a variety of reactions while watching, horrified, intrigued, bored, put off, dismissive, but ultimately I find it did inspire thinking. And what is art but to awaken the mind? So this is art, and like art, it demands participation. The historical aspect of it, I think, is symbolic. Arguing over historical merits would be missing the point of this. It seems to follow this one eyed character who follows some lost soldiers of fortune. I think he is like the Anton character in No Country for Old Men. Who Anton exactly is, well, that's the game, isn't it? Now, here, who is One Eye? We meet him as a fierce fighter and a seeker of vengeance. I suppose Odin is depicted as one-eyed. Is he a wandering god? Perhaps an angel of death, or just a man. Some say having one eye represents a reincarnate Cain who is to return at the end of days and be an antichrist type figure. Zechariah prophesizes of a worthless shepherd who abandons his flock and ends up with a pierced right eye and a wounded arm. Is this some damned lost soul? Their destination is the Holy Land, Jerusalem, but they become lost at sea and end up in the Americas. An interesting script choice. There's a biblical theory that America is the actual biblical Holy Land. Doesn't mean it would be a peaceful place. If that theory were true, it means the battles of Armageddon, I think there's supposed to be 9 actually, are destined to take place there. And indeed, this isn't a peaceful destination. The movie raises questions about man's intentions versus God intentions, the means versus the ends, ambition versus fate. And you could ask yourself, what if one eye is actually none of those former theories or suggestions, but perhaps an unrecognized shepherd? Jesus was not recognized after he rose from the dead. We read in Revelation that the Lamb remains as it has been slain. There is a theory that Jesus will be rejected at his return because, well, he remains in a beaten and scarred body, and all this one-eyed nonsense is just a mockery of that upcoming day. I don't know, but it's a sad idea. But this movie has these headstrong warriors. They distrust this scarred man, but he fights well, so they bring him along, and he defends the innocent, and they're annoyed by it. He speaks little, but his advice is better than they deserve. But they only follow him when all is lost. They only listen when it's too late. I have no reason to believe the maker of this film had any of that in mind when making it, but these kind of movies are canvases that give out patterns of ideas, and your role is not to solve or approve or validate it, but rather ask yourself, what is this like? Where does this pattern fit into my body of knowledge and memories?